Hey there, biology students. Mr. Mechnick here. I happen to be out in the middle of this tropical rainforest, and it's raining, and I've been saturated for the last hour and a half. So I'm here to present to you photosynthesis, the chemical process of converting carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. So thanks for being with me today as we go through information about photosynthesis. So what does this word mean? Well, if we break apart the word photosynthesis, it simply means putting together with light. So in order for plants to make glucose and oxygen, they need some carbon dioxide and water. So as you know, in the tropics, there's plenty of water to go around for our plants. There's lots of carbon dioxide in our Earth's atmosphere. So these tropical rainforest plants are great sinks for carbon dioxide. They can absorb lots of it. And with the rain that we're having today, and once the sun comes out in a little while, these plants are going to be pumping out the glucose like crazy. So this right here represents the chemical equation for photosynthesis. It's important that you know that it takes 6 carbon dioxide molecules to combine with 6 water molecules to produce C6H12O6, which is a simple sugar called glucose, and 6 oxygen molecules. So there you have it. The chemical equation for photosynthesis. That's something you need to know. So, as we've been looking at in class, we all have an understanding of what makes leaves green. So having green leaves is an indicator that there's a pigment inside the chloroplast. So this diagram right here represents a chloroplast loaded with lots of chlorophyll pigments. It makes them green because, as we should understand, the light from the sun is absorbed and it's utilized by the plants to combine that water and that carbon dioxide, and some of the light in the visible part of the spectrum, is reflected in the green wavelengths. So we don't see reds and blues because the plant is absorbing that. Instead, chlorophyll is reflecting the green light, which makes leaves green. Not only do plants absorb the light in the 450 and 425 nanometer range because of chlorophyll, they also absorb some light in the 650 nanometer range. But there's also a whole other group of pigments called the carotenoids, the phycoceratins, the phycocyanins. These are called accessory pigments. And the benefit of these accessory pigments is so that the plants can absorb a lot of other wavelengths. And remember, more light, more energy, more photosynthesis. So some of these accessory pigments that we observe in the leaves in Wisconsin as they change colors in the falls, we start to see some of the reds and the oranges. That's due to carotene and xanthophyll. So these two accessory pigments typically reflect yellow light and orange light. They'll absorb the other parts of the spectrum, but they'll reflect yellow and orange. Anthocyanins are another group of pigments, and these typically reflect the red light. So we see red apples, red cabbage, red maple leaves. That's because of the presence of the anthocyanins. Once all these accessory pigments disappear, typically you have a brown leaf that's left over, and that's because of the tannin that's left over after the leaves have changed colors. So in terms of the chloroplast, this amazing little structure found in plant cells, this structure is responsible for doing the magic of photosynthesis. So what should you know about the chloroplast? You should know it's very structured, it's very organized. It has structures called thylakoids, which are these tiny little discs. So if you can think of this as a stack of coins, each thylakoid is one coin. All of these combined together, a stack of coins, is called a granum. So the granum is the place where the light is absorbed. Outside of the granum is what's called the stroma. So the stroma is a good place for oxygen to be released from here. This is a good place for carbon dioxide to accumulate so the plants can use that. It's a good place for the water to kind of accumulate so the plants can start making sugars by photosynthesis. So thylakoids are discs, and this is a site of the light-dependent reaction of photosynthesis. Photo means light, so the light-dependent reaction happens in the thylakoids. The grana, a lot of thylakoids stacked together. And the stroma is the fluid-filled space around the grana, and that's the location for the independent reaction of photosynthesis. The synthesis part, the part where the sugar is actually produced. So this diagram is a very important diagram because it kind of just shows the inputs and the outputs of photosynthesis in a chloroplast. So if we look at this diagram, we can see that sunlight is necessary to kind of get these electrons inside the chlorophyll molecules excited. And when they do this, they're going to help split this water molecule apart. When water molecules are split, it releases some hydrogen. The hydrogen gets carried over by this NADPH molecule. So the H right there is what's transported over to a process called the Calvin cycle. And once the hydrogens get pumped into here, these hydrogens are going to combine with carbon dioxide in the Calvin cycle to ultimately make this sugar. And if you remember, how many hydrogen atoms are in a single glucose molecule? C6H12. There's 12 hydrogens in every single glucose. So every time a water molecule is split, 2 hydrogens get pumped over with this NADPH into the Calvin cycle, and they combine with carbon dioxide to help make sugars. So the light-dependent reaction happens in the thylakoids, and the byproduct, once water is actually split, these hydrogens get transported to the Calvin cycle. What's left over is the oxygen, and the oxygen diffuses out of the chloroplast into the cell's cytoplasm, and then eventually out of the cell's cytoplasm into the leaf, and out of the leaf through the stoma. Very good. You got it. The stoma, the little tiny opening on the leaf, regulated by guard cells, release this extra oxygen that's produced during photosynthesis. So this diagram, I will give you a copy of this in class. It will be something that I expect you to be able to label on your own. So when it comes time for assessment, there will be missing pieces in this diagram, and you need to know the inputs and the outputs of photosynthesis. You need to know how the light-dependent reaction and the light reaction and the light-independent reaction, or the Calvin cycle, are connected. What makes them work, and how are they dependent on each other? So just to kind of summarize, the Calvin cycle, the light-dependent reaction, is referring to the synthesis part. All right, and this is simply, let's make some sugars by using the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen from the light-dependent reaction. ATP is a source of energy that drives the Calvin cycle. That's pretty much what I need you to know. So to kind of finish this up, we can see the importance of photosynthesis in our lives. It provides organic molecules like glucose and oxygen for all heterotrophs. So plants need those sugars so they can grow and develop, and they need to make some ATP so they can reproduce. And we ultimately have figured out that, you know what? These plants are really tasty and we like to eat them. And we eat a lot of those sugars, sometimes too much of those sugars. So being a heterotroph, we rely heavily upon these organic molecules and the oxygen that's produced by photosynthesis. We process the carbon dioxide and the water during cellular respiration. That's our byproduct that we produce as we consume sugars. So we in return release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, and we release some water in the process as well, and the autotrophs, or the plants, can utilize that for photosynthesis. So this cycle kind of summarizes why photosynthesis is so important for living things. So that's the podcast on photosynthesis. Stay dry, get some sun, and I'll see you in class next time.